on the offensive on inflation, on the economy, issues that there's been criticism that they've been spending the summer avoiding talking too much about issues like abortion. Well, the former president discussing that right now as John Fetterman, the Democratic nominee, appeared just ahead of this. Fetterman has caught some criticism for failing to release his medical records in full. Remember, he had that stroke in May. He's had trouble speaking and processing audio. He's also been talking about his position on fracking. The debate from October 25th, where they played that clip of him say that he's never been for fracking. Well, he's now tried to clarify that and say, well, he's always been for fracking as long as environmental concerns have been addressed. So these are the final issues now that are really playing into this campaign, that are really playing into Fetterman's campaign. He had a substantial lead over the summer. That has narrowed now in much of the polling, if you're looking at to polls that really show this race within the margin of error here. It begins here today in Pittsburgh, heads on over to Philadelphia to close this one out. Back to you.
Who actually voted against more resources for police departments? Or is it the Democratic leaders who worked with President Biden to pass the first major gun safety legislation in 30 years? That's the choice in this election. Who will fight for your freedom? Is it Republican politicians and judicial appointees who think they should get to decide when you start a family and how many children you have or who you marry and who you love? Or is it Democratic leaders who believe that the freedom to make these most personal of decisions belong to you, to every American, and not politicians in Washington? That's the choice in this election. Pittsburgh, who's gonna fight to make our democracy actually work for you? Republican politicians that promise if they get control of Congress, they're going to spend the next 2 years investigating their political opponents. They've said it. Some of them have said they're going to impeach President Biden. They're not sure what for. But apparently that's beside the point. How's that going to help you pay your bills? Or do you think you maybe stand a better chance of getting help and things improving if you've got President Biden and Democratic leaders who've worked together and sometimes have gotten Republicans to pass an infrastructure bill that creates new jobs? Who've making healthcare prescription drugs cheaper? Who've made unions stronger? Who've made the single largest investment ever in the fight against climate change? That's the choice in this election. Pennsylvania, you've got a choice between politicians who seem willing to say anything and do anything to get power, and people who see you and know you and care about you and share in your values, who want to make your lives better and move this country forward and bring people together. And let me be clear about this. This hasn't always been a partisan thing. One of the tough things about campaigning, it makes it sound as if, oh, you know, it's blue team versus red team, and that's all I care about. Listen, my favorite president ever was a guy named Abe Lincoln. He helped found the Republican Party. There used to be GOP members who championed progress in civil rights and rule of law. But, you know, I've got to look at the facts, and the facts are these days, just about every GOP politician seems obsessed with two things. They want to own the libs. Let's get the libs. And let's get Donald Trump's approval. We need Donald to really, hey, what do we say about, don't move now. But that's their agenda. They're not interested in actually solving problems. What they want to do is make you angry and then find somebody to blame. Because that way you may not notice they've got no answers of their own. John's opponents, he has answers, they're just the wrong ones. You want to lose weight? Take raspberry ketones. Got leg cramps? Try lavender soap. Want to prevent dementia? Palm oil, a miracle solution. I mean, never mind that none of these things have been proven to work. Some things might be harmful. You just got to believe, and then hand over your credit card information. Snake oil man? Listen, it's easy to joke about Dr. Oz and all these quack remedies he's pushed on TV, but it matters. It says something about his character. If somebody's willing to peddle snake oil to make a buck, then he's probably willing to sell snake oil to get elected. You deserve better than somebody who's just trying to make a quick buck. Somebody willing to say anything to get attention. You deserve somebody who knows you. You deserve somebody who stood side by side with you. Somebody who will work every day and fight for you. Somebody who's actually from Pennsylvania. You deserve somebody like John Fetterman. John has been fighting for other people his whole life. Here's a guy who found his calling as a mentor for Big Brothers Big Sisters. Somebody who joined AmeriCorps to teach GED classes for young parents. Who ran for mayor of a small town to create jobs and reduce gun violence. John doesn't just talk the talk. He's walked the walk alongside you. So you know that he means what he says. John will help build an economy that works for everybody and you know that because he's worked for everybody. Not just folks who write big checks. Not just for special interests and those in power. He'll stand up for you. He'll improve the criminal justice system. He'll lower the cost of prescription drugs. You think Dr. Oz is going to do all that? Right answer. And you also know that John is tough. And not just because he wears shorts in the middle of winter. Like a lot of Pennsylvanians, like a lot of working people, he knows what it's like to get knocked down. And then get back up. John's stroke did not change who he is. It didn't change what he cares about. It didn't change his values, his heart, his fight. It doesn't change who he will represent when he gets to the United States Senate. He'll represent you, and that's what you deserve. That's why the choice is pretty simple, Pennsylvania. You don't want a leader who's just looking out for himself. You don't need slick talk. You want a leader who's going to work hard for you and who knows enough about hardship that when you get knocked down, you know he's going to be there to help you back up. That's what this election's about. And it applies to your congressional races as well. Are you going to vote for Republicans who oppose common sense gun safety measures, who want to cut Social Security, cut Medicare? Or are you going to vote for folks like Chris Deluzio, an Iraq War veteran, who's going to work to bring back manufacturing jobs to Pennsylvania? Or Summer Lee, who's got a history of standing up for working people? That's what you have to decide. And while you're at it, you're going to have to decide whether you want leaders who are going to stand up for women. For women having the right to make their own health care decisions. Abortion is controversial in this country. It always has been. I genuinely believe there are good people of conscience who may differ with me on this issue. But I believe strongly, and I think you do too, that women everywhere should be able to control what happens with their own bodies. It shouldn't be controversial to say that the most personal of healthcare choices should be made by a woman and her doctor and not a bunch of mostly male politicians. That's why when the Supreme Court struck down Roe, it was a wake-up for a lot of young people, especially young women, who may have taken Roe for granted. And it was a reminder that a politicized court, they can reinterpret what we thought were well-settled constitutional rights. We can go backwards. If Republicans take back the House and Senate, we could be one presidential election away from a nationwide ban on access to abortion. And that might just be the beginning. You know, I taught constitutional law for a decade. I can tell you this. If a court does not believe in a zone of privacy that allows each of us to make our own decisions without government interference, then other freedoms we take for granted could be at risk. Clarence Thomas has said as much. If there's no right to privacy, then same-sex marriage could be at risk. Almost every Republican in the House of Representatives already voted against guaranteeing a right to use contraception. That's not in the Constitution. That's interpreted as a part of the right to privacy. If we don't have that, and they take back power, there's no guarantee birth control won't be next. Think about that. You got to vote. Here in Pennsylvania. I'm sorry, what was that? Here in Pennsylvania, John's opponent. Go ahead, go ahead. Here in Pennsylvania, John's opponent said the decision about whether to have an abortion should be made, I'm quoting here, by women, doctors, and local political leaders. Really? The mayor gets to decide what you do with your body? No. Which school board member? County sheriff? Who exactly are you talking about should tell you about when to start a family? John Fetterman believes women should be able to make their own health care decisions. And if you send him to Washington, he'll make sure women in Pennsylvania always have access to the care that they need. So I think somebody mentioned earlier, we're setting our clocks back tomorrow by an hour. On Tuesday, let's make sure our country doesn't get set back 50 years. And let me just say, that's got to be worth 15 minutes of your time. We got some young people out here. Most of you have voted, maybe not all of you. Maybe some of your roommates or whatnot are still not sure whether it's worth the. If that's not worth 15 minutes, what is? Well, maybe if you need another reason to vote, let me tell you, consider the fact that our democracy is also on the ballot. You know, I've been traveling through the country, and I got to admit, going out on the campaign trail feels a little harder than it used to be. And it's not just because I'm grayer and stiffer. Back when I was, part of it is back when I was first running for office. I remember when I first started campaigning here in Pennsylvania. You know, I'd go to various towns, and people didn't always agree with me on everything. But, you know, I could go into a small town, maybe mostly Republican town. Not a lot of folks look like me. And I'd go to a VFW hall, or I'd go to a diner. And maybe if there was a rural area, I'd go to a county fair, and I'd sit down and I'd have a piece of pie and coffee, because I like pie. And you'd have a conversation with somebody. And you talk about your kids, you talk about your parents, maybe somebody got sick in your family and what that was like. You talk about the hopes you had for the future. And you might not agree on everything, but at least you suddenly felt some connection. You saw, okay, even though we come from different places, we have a tie that binds. And maybe we might persuade each other about some things. And I'd learned something, and they'd learned something about each other's lives. And that was one of the joys, one of the glories of campaigning, was seeing this incredible diversity of the country, but also understanding that there was this thread that tied us together. And by the way, that's why I ended up getting a bunch of Republican votes. Hard to believe, but it was true. And then after I won, my Republican opponent, John McCain, graciously conceded. And he wished me luck for the sake of the country. And we still had arguments. He was still in the Senate, and he'd give me a tough time. He could be cranky sometimes. But we all agreed on the basic foundation of our democracy. And then even if we were competing, we were still basically on the same team. And that's what's at risk right now. You know, Democrats may not be perfect. I'm the first one to admit it. I'm not perfect. No politician is. We're just like all of you. We can make mistakes. But right now, with a few notable exceptions, most Republican politicians aren't even pretending that the rules apply to them. They just make stuff up. I mean, John's opponent still refuses to acknowledge that Joe Biden won the 2020 election. He says he needs more information to determine if the results were legitimate. What information are you talking about? He won't say, just more. He's hired people who marched to the Capitol on January 6th. They're on his campaign. Donald Trump says he needs Dr. Oz in the Senate in case there's a close election again. Think about that. So he's basically saying, look, if I lose again, I need him to see if he can put his thumbs on the scale. That is not what this country is supposed to be about. And I understand democracy might not seem like a top priority right now when gas prices are high and grocery prices are high. Sometimes it feels like government isn't making enough progress on the issues that matter to you and your family. I get that, because sometimes progress is slow. This is a big, complicated country with a lot of different interests, and it's hard to get stuff done sometimes. But let me tell you something, Pennsylvania. We've seen throughout history, we've seen around the world what happens when you give up on democracy. We can see it in other countries where government tells you what books you can read and what books you can't. Countries that own all the media and just pump out propaganda and put dissidents and reporters in jail. Countries where it really doesn't matter who you vote for because the fix really is in. And people in power do whatever they want. And where corruption is rampant because there's no accountability. When that happens, people get hurt. That has real life consequences, and that's why generations of Americans fought and died for the idea of self-government. That's why suffragists marched so women could be part of we the people. That's why the civil rights movement marched to make sure that all of us were included. And that's why we set up rules to make our democracy work. And by the way, these aren't really that complicated, these rules. We teach them to our kids when they're in the sandbox. Be honest. Be fair. If you're in a group, everybody gets a say. Everybody gets a turn. If you don't get your way, don't throw a tantrum. Don't pick up your ball and go home. You know, when I ran for Congress the first time, in a primary, I got whooped. Lost by 30 points. I did not feel good about that. You know what I didn't do, though? I didn't say it was rigged. I didn't start an insurrection. I went back and did some soul searching and figured out what I had done wrong and tried to do better the next time. And that's what we teach our kids when things don't work out exactly as they want. Okay, think about it, figure it out, do better the next time. These are basic rules that we teach our kids. They undergird our democracy, and that is at stake in this election. Because right now we've got folks who don't tell the truth and are willing to play around with the rules so they get their way no matter what. And that's why it's not enough to elect Democrats like Chris Deluzio and Summer Lee and Josh Shapiro and John Fetterman. You've got to elect good people up and down the ballot. State legislatures, local seats. You've got to elect people who believe every vote should count, full stop. And that's not a radical idea. It didn't used to be. You've got to vote for people who will protect the integrity of our elections. Because that could make a difference if this thing gets close. Now, here's the good news. I'm going to give you some good news right now. The good news is you have the power in your hands to steer this country in a better direction. But it only happens if you vote. It only happens if you participate. We joke in my house sometimes that between Michelle and me, Michelle can be a little bit glass half empty. I, on the other hand, am the hope and change guy. I'm usually a little more optimistic. When she's reading the papers or watching the news and she gets a little down on the state of the country or the state of the world, I tell her, hon, everything's going to be okay. And I believe it will. But it won't be okay on its own. It'll be okay because we worked for it. It'll be okay because we fought for it. Not just on election day, but every day in between. These are tough times, Pennsylvania, but we've been through tougher times before. The important thing is we don't give in to the temptation to give up, to get cynical. The important thing is we don't turn inward. The important thing is we don't see politics as a zero-sum game where anything goes and rules are made to be broken. And the only way for us to win, people like us, is for people like them to lose. That kind of division in our minds, we got to get out of that mindset, because even in our darker moments, and there have been darker moments before, we've always had more in common than our politics suggests. Even when times are tough, what unites us has always been stronger than what divides us. There have always been certain rules that bind us together as citizens, no matter where we come from, no matter what we look like, what our last names are, how we worship, who we love. That's the promise of America. That's who we are. We may not fix all our problems overnight, but we can make things better. And better is worth fighting for. So if you're anxious, if you're frustrated right now, don't complain. Don't move. Don't tune out. Vote. Get off your couch and what? Put down your phones and what? Vote for leaders like Chris Deluzio. Vote for folks like Summer Lee. Vote for Josh Shapiro. Vote for John Fetterman. Vote for leaders who are going to fight for that big, inclusive, hopeful, forward-looking America that we believe in. Vote for a country that is more fair and more equal and more just and more free. It is in your hands. Let's get to work. I love you, Pittsburgh. Thank you, Pennsylvania. Come on.